Welcome to today's In Conversation session on mindset hacks. I'm Liz Mayers, co-founder of EDI Accreditation. We're a bit like ISO certification for equality, diversity and inclusion, and accredited measures EDI performance. It provides, if you like, a kite mark of achievement and encourages best practice for EDI in the long term. Because we're completely impartial, we don't sell consulting or training services, but we found that most organisations that became accredited wanted to keep getting better and better. So we built a brilliant community of specialists to help them on the next steps of their journey. And I'm delighted today to be joined by a brilliant panel made up of some of our community members. I'm going to get them to introduce themselves and we'll go, let's go alphabetically. So we'll start with Amanda, please.
Thank you. So my name's Amanda McEvoy. I run my business called McEvoy Training Solutions, helping employees really to thrive at work rather than just survive at work. So I do bespoke training delivery solutions, interventions around insights discovery, menopause, mental health first aid, and neurodiversity. So being able to support the working environment so that employees can really go and actually, like I say, thrive rather than just survive in a workplace.
Amazing, thank you. Gemma.
Just realising whether I know the alphabet, just working out where I go next. So I'm Gemma Rabbini and I run Coach and Bloom, which is a company which is set up to support businesses to retain and empower their amazing female talent. As Amanda said, a lot of women will kind of have those moments, whether it's menopause, whether it's maternity return. And so I'm all about helping women build lives that they love and careers they can be really proud of, and ensuring that we get more women into senior level roles in organisations, because we know from research that when women are in senior level roles, and particularly when we have diversity at a senior level, companies thrive, to use Amanda's word. They just do commercially much better. And so, so I'm all about women in organisations and helping us create future female leaders.
Amazing, that's fantastic. And last but not least, the amazing Tutu.
Hi everyone, my name is Tutu Popoola and I am the lead consultant and MD of my own company, which is Sleek HR Limited. Sleek HR Limited, we provide HR consultancy and training and recruitment for organizations who are wanting to be compliant with the employment law, but also who believe that equality, diversity, and inclusion is at the heart of what they do. So we help organizations not just to be legally compliant, but also to ensure that they are an inclusive organization, and we weave that in with what we will call their regular employment life cycle and their processes, ensuring that that is integrated. So it's not a separate EDI is a separate thing they need to do on the side, but we weave it into what they would do like on a day-to-day basis. So yes, really feel very privileged to be joining you wonderful ladies here today. And thank you very much for the invitation, Liz.
Absolute pleasure, absolute pleasure. So in our last conversation, we explored some issues which constrict women's careers and how organisations can support their female talent better. The recording is available online for anyone who missed it. And we talked about the fact that many of the career limiting changes and challenges faced by women are not really of our choosing, but they're caused by fluctuating female health, whether that's menstruation, fertility changes, pregnancy, maternity, menopause. We go through a lot in our lifetime, right? And without us having these superpowers, the human race would die out. So actually, it's kind of in everyone's best interest, especially organisations, to support their female talent and even the load a bit where they can. So we discussed some practical advice for how organisations can support their female talent better. But today we're going to talk mindset hacks for women to prioritise and support themselves from the inside out. However, men, this is not your signal to switch off or tune out. I'm pretty sure lots of you have a mother, a sister, a daughter, a partner, a friend, employees, a woman whose well-being you care about. And they might really appreciate you having a better understanding and being able to then offer support too. So please do keep listening. Going to kick off first question then. What are inexpensive ways that we can support ourselves, our mental health, our well-being? We've obviously got coaches on the session today. So is coaching the way to go?
My gosh, I feel like I've got so many ideas that people can use. So coaching is massively beneficial, but I think, yes, it's amazing to have someone who's constantly in your corner, who can kind of call you out and challenge you on some of the things that you're thinking about. But actually, when we think about inexpensive hacks, I'm going to try and be kind of as cost efficient as possible. If you talk out loud about something that is on your mind, something that is kind of really riling you, or a decision that you need to make, there's research to show that actually that's super powerful. So yes, get a coach. Yes, that kind of elevates that support. But actually, just talking into a voice note, sometimes I do that. I'll just talk into a voice note, record what I've said, and then I'll play it back and be like, wow, I'm actually quite wise, or I actually said something that was really helpful to me. So I think completely free. Do that if you've got something that you need to work through, and it might just give you a few nuggets of things that you can do to move on. The other thing that is definitely for men as well as women is get outside within half an hour, ideally, of waking up. There's a lot of research that shows that resetting your circadian rhythm in the morning is so important. It reduces anxiety and it helps you sleep better, as well as probably loads of other things. I'm not a nutritionist, but it's really, really helpful. We know getting outside makes us feel more open. It helps us think in a different way. It makes us feel better. But actually, if you can do that within a particular window in the morning, so even if you don't have a garden, you just have a balcony, just go outside and have your first morning green tea or whatever you drink in the morning, sitting outside. So not through a window, get outside. If you can do a walk and some exercise, that's amazing, because we know that releases endorphins. That's really good for us. But just get outside. And that point in the mornings, you'll probably find that your sleep improves and your anxiety reduces. So they'd be my very quick top 2 things.
Amazing. Anyone else? Amanda?
Yeah, I was going to say I completely agree with the getting outside, even when it's miserable and wet, which we have a lot of in the UK. So I have 2 dogs, and I have to say they are absolute lifesavers because they need a walk. They are creatures of comfort. They are creatures of routine. They know that every day they get up and this is our routine. And once I'm washed and dressed, they go for a walk. And so I have to go because they need that. And it's lovely. It kind of, no matter what kind of mood I've woken up in, once I've walked the dogs and I've had that fresh air and that bit of exercise, I feel fantastic. The other one for me that I think has frequently been my absolute saviour for my sanity is having a friend that you can just get it all off your chest to. So my friend and I started Monday Morning Moan. So we used to have a Monday morning moan about just anything and everything that had happened in the last week or with the weekend or with the kids or anything. And then we enjoyed it so much, we kind of started a Wednesday whinge. And then it's just kind of grown into, we now just call it a morning moan because it can be on any given day of the week, whenever either of us are free. But it is literally, we'll meet up at one or the other's houses, so we don't have to go out and buy coffee. It's just come to my house, have a cup of tea, and we just kind of offload. And very often, like you said, Gemma, when you say it out loud and you go, God, actually, just saying it out loud, I've kind of given myself the answer to my question that's been buzzing around in my head. So I think there is something to be said about kind of saying it out loud and just clearing your thoughts, but also just having that sounding board from someone who, it's really informal. You're sitting with a cup of tea and you're chatting about this and that and you're bouncing from things. And sometimes you do find that you kind of give them something that you weren't necessarily going to give them, but you end up talking through, and by the end of it, generally, I have to say, by the end of it, I kind of go, yeah, I feel ready to face the rest of the week now. This has been really worth it. And it's like free therapy, really.
Yeah, definitely. Tutu, what about you?
So I agree with what both Amanda and Gemma said, but I'd just like to add some points to the fantastic points that you've already made. And these 3 things I want to say are things that we can do by ourselves for ourselves. Say no more often.
Like
I find that we're very quick to say yes. We're generally speaking, and I know I'm generalizing now, but permit me. We tend, so if you think about our home situations, most of the time, again, generally speaking, women are very giving. We think about what everybody else needs. Is at the back, there's that mental load, as has been described, is at the back of our minds. What this person needs, what I need to do about this, the washing. I'm having my meeting. If I can put the washing machine on, if I can do this. So there is that, which is, I think, is already full-time job, because your brain is processing that in the background anyway. Now, when we come into the workplace, some of what we consider to be the housekeeping part of a job, of a working environment, for example, if you look at it, mostly it's women that do it, isn't it? Making sure that, you know, the work environment is running as it should. They're not really part of the job description, but somehow it ends up with us in a way. So I think that sometimes we need to say no more often and be okay with that. So that way we have less to do. And it kind of balances things out a little bit in terms of our level of responsibility. It protects us as well, protects your energy for the things that you really, really want to be doing. I don't know about you, but sometimes I find that there's some things that I really want to do, I want to give time to, but because of all these other things that I'm doing as well, by the time I get to the thing that if I do get to the things that I really want to do, I'm a bit tired. So, and that's because I haven't put the appropriate boundaries in place. I haven't protected my energy for what matters the most to me. So I think that sometimes if we say no more often, I started doing that now. I've really struggled with it because I want to help everybody and I want to do quite a lot. But I'm thinking in the long run, is this helping? Is it a help or a hindrance for me? Also, the second point I would like to make is for us to be kinder to ourselves. I find that sometimes we listen to that. We need to pay attention to our inner critic, the voice that says, you know, the way we think about ourselves, the way we talk to ourselves internally. And I think a good way to say that is to think, if this happened to somebody else, will I speak to them this way? We're more forgiving of other people. We're more accommodating of other people's behavior. But then we're so hard on ourselves sometimes because we have this sometimes really high standards that we've set of what we expect of ourselves, and we're not as kind to ourselves as we would be to the next person. So I think it's kind of, I find that it's kind of top tier self-care for me to say, you know, am I supporting myself? Would I think this or that you've done that really badly? You've not really done that well. But I would never say that to Liz, for example. Am I thinking about something? I'll probably want to, and I haven't, Liz, by the way, I have never thought about it that way, but that's just an example. So if I wanted to give her feedback, I'll probably think, okay, how should I phrase this in a way that's constructive, that she can take what she needs out of it? But are we doing that for our own self? Or will we just skip all that and just go straight to like the harshest type of criticism for ourselves? So I think sometimes we need to practice that self-kindness, if I would call it that way. And the third one, which is something that is really simple, but it's also very difficult to do sometimes, is sleep. Sleep, you know, prioritizing sleep. Because sometimes I think that, I'm going to do this, so I'll quickly do that. I'll do this last email. I'll do this, I'll complete this process. And then I think we feel like we've earned the right to rest, to sleep, where in actual fact, we don't need to earn it. We need it. Our body needs it. Our minds, our productivity needs for that to happen. So those three things, I would say, because I believe that sometimes we need to start with ourselves before we start thinking about what can my workplace do for me? What can, this person do for me? But what am I doing for myself? To start with that. Before I then go on to what my environment. So those are kind of the three things that I've kind of noted. But like I said, I quite agree with the points that Amanda and Gemma have made initially.
I just think that is amazing. Like the boundary setting and the communicating what you need. I think it all starts from what's important to me, like what matters in this moment, and getting clear on that. And then love that. Like the saying no, I think is really interesting. And I think typically a lot of women I work with don't have that default no in their head. So there's kind of a bit of a mindset thing to be like, assume everything's going to be no, and I'll see by exception if I can accept that. But also, like, what's the language around that? You know, I'd love to help you, Liz, with what you've asked me to do, but I just need to have a look at my diary. Like, buy yourself some time. So it doesn't necessarily need to be no, I can't. If that word is triggering for you, but I totally see, like, completely agree with what you're saying. Sometimes it might just be putting a barrier in between, like maybe just taking a breath, or just going, so that sounds amazing, tell me a bit more about it, before you go, I'll do that, I'll take that on, I'll do that, I'll do watering of the plants in the office, and I'll do the pouring of the drinks, and I'll do all the, you know, the birthday card purchasing and all that kind of stuff. But boundaries require you to be able to communicate, but to know what is it for you that you need, and where do you set those boundaries. So I couldn't agree more. I think sometimes it's the kind of, how well are we able to have those conversations with our networks or with ourselves? Like,
yeah, definitely.
That's a red line, you know.
Definitely. I mean, for me, I've always really admired people that meditate or do mindfulness. I've got a friend who journals, and I don't get it. I'm sure
I love journaling.
I'm sure I'm
I
sure
write everything down
it properly, but I've always just gone, oh, okay, so you write stuff down. For me, my equivalent is a bath. My happy place is a bath. So I will have bubbles up to my chin. I'll have, you know, lights off or candlelight, and I will not have my phone. I might read a book. I might just sit and switch off and process. But I think even just taking, you know, half an hour or an hour to do something that you enjoy, that isn't, as we say, for someone else in the household, or isn't about business or work or one of those things, is actually really quite liberating as well, isn't it? It's just giving ourselves permission, I suppose, to do something that feels self-indulgent.
Yeah.
And I think I've kind of reframed things now. So I always used to feel really guilty doing something for me because it was taking me away from something I should be doing for someone else. And actually, it was when I was doing my mental health first aid training initially, and someone came up and just said, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup. And it's really stuck with me because I just think, I can't pour from an empty cup. I can't be a good business owner. I can't be a good employee. I can't be a good mum, a good friend. I can't be a good anything if I have nothing to give. So actually, I don't now see it as selfish. I see it as self-care. And I love the fact that you take time out, Liz, because I love the idea of a bath. And in my head, I have exactly that scene, you know, bubbles, and it's calm, and I've got music. And then the last time I had a bath, I got in, and after 5 minutes, I was like, right, I'm really bored now. I need to get out. And so I've realised baths are not for me.
I can stay in there for hours.
My brain just goes too wild with it. I'm like, I can't be sitting in here. This is a waste of my time. I'm not enjoying it. So I think it's, for me, it's doing something that's for me, but maybe either more active or more mentally active. So, and I think I've embraced that more. So I found out a few years ago that I have ADHD, which has explained so many things to me.
That would make sense.
But it makes sense why I can't sit in a bath. It's just not a relaxing experience. But for me, you know, I have now learned that if I can find a book or a series of books that I can get into, actually just reading a few pages before I go to bed, and I kind of set myself a target now of, like, you know, don't read any less than this, but don't read any more than that, because if I get into it, it could be 3 o'clock in the morning and I suddenly go, oh gosh, I need to sleep. And I think, Tutu, I absolutely agree. Sleep is something that we absolutely need. It's not something we've earned the right to do at the end of the day. It's something we need to do to prepare for the next day. And so actually reading does help me to have a better quality of sleep. So I think it's kind of linking everything, and it's not necessarily, you know, meditation. Again, meditation for me is like torture because I just can't sit still enough and quiet enough. And so I'm kind of just getting really anxious and like, okay, when's it going to be over? But I know lots of people love that. So I think there's no one right thing. And I think that's the thing we all have to acknowledge is it'll be something different for everybody. So anyone listening today, might resonate with one thing that one of us have said, and we've all said quite different things. So I think it's finding the thing that's right for you, and if it's right for you, go for it. Don't feel guilty about it, as long as it's something for you that's self-indulgent.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, I'd be interested to know, Amanda, as a menopause expert, does it change for women as they go through life? Do those needs, either physical or mental, change with those fluctuations, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are few people that go through menopause and kind of go, wow, God, it happened. I didn't know that happened. Yay, me. They're the people I generally scowl at and like, okay, wish I was you. For most of us, when we do go through menopause, it is a tough time. It's tough physically, mentally, emotionally. You know, I've heard women say they've literally fallen apart when they've gone through menopause, and it's that combination. And I think things do change. For me, I kind of go with forewarned is forearmed. If I know something, it may happen. I could, much as you can never prepare for menopause because you don't know what symptoms you're going to have. I think the understanding that things will change. And I think I've learned and I've accepted now. I grieved for my old self because me previous or prior to menopause was a very different to me now. You know, I did have a different body, different energy levels, different interests even. I enjoyed different things, and I think menopause hasn't taken that away from me, but it has changed my perspective. It's changed what I can do, and there have been limits on what I can do. And so I've gone through almost a grieving process. And I think when I talk about this in menopause training, lots of people that really resonates to them to go, I just want to get back to where I was in my 20s. And it's that acknowledgement that actually you're never going to be the person you were in your 20s. And there's a beautiful Japanese saying, which is that menopause is like your second spring. And I really love that because I do think you can get through menopause and blossom the other side. Um, but I think it is acknowledging that life is very different when you're going through it, and life is also very different once you're through it. You know, there are hormone changes that you have no control over, and because they're erratic, every day is different. And I think the more you kind of embrace that and go, I'm on a roller coaster and I'm certainly not in control of where this roller coaster is going, but I'm going to ride it because at some point I will get off the other end. And I think as long as you acknowledge that, if you have more of a positive mindset going into it, I think those that do cope with it better. So I think information, education, and just having that positive mindset of this is not going to be forever help people generally to get through. But I think there's so many changes, you know, physically, emotionally, mentally, and reaching out for support.
Yeah.
I think that's the main thing.
I think it's really interesting that it's talked about so much more these days than it ever was. But even with all the discussion and stuff that's happened, for me, I'd never had a hot flush in my life. I thought I was one of those that was sailing through it, I'll be honest. And actually, what happened is my joints and my hands were in so much pain, so uncomfortable. One day I was barely able to take the lid off a milk carton. And I went to the doctors thinking I had arthritis. I was like, oh, this is going to be awful. And she was like, yeah, you're a certain age, yeah, menopause. And I was like, what? I had no idea that that was even a thing, that could be a symptom. And so for me, that was really interesting. And in a conversation with a friend who is similar stage of life, and she said she remembers as a teenager going through a period where her and her mum clashed all the time. And she would get so frustrated with her mum, going, but I told you. What do you mean you don't remember? What do you mean the conversation didn't happen? And she said, I look back now, she was probably menopausal. She was having the brain fog. She was having just that. but it really impacted their relationship, because she said, I just felt so unheard. I felt insignificant to her, because as far as I could tell, she didn't bother remembering.
Yeah.
Whereas my daughter now says, are you doing that brain fog thing again? I'm like, yeah, probably. So even just being able to acknowledge it and have those conversations, I think, in our homes, in our workplaces, really can change that perception of, oh, you just haven't bothered listening, or okay, this one's out of your control. So,
and I think that's the thing at work, it really does. And we see lots and lots of, really super experienced, super knowledgeable people who they kind of hit menopause, and because of various symptoms and because of hormones, they find their self-esteem drops, their confidence drops. If they're having sleepless nights or they've got insomnia, again, they're coming to work tired, which then exacerbates the brain fog, which then cements the fact that they're just useless and can't do their job anymore. And we see so many people who either don't go for promotions that previously they would have gone for because they just don't feel like they can step into that and step up. We see lots of people who will say they'll go part-time because they're just not able to cope with full-time work because they're not being supported. And if people don't know what's happening, it's really, really scary. I know I had someone in one of my courses who said when she first started getting symptoms of menopause, she actually thought, given that there's a family history of dementia, she actually thought it was early onset of dementia. And that's a really scary place to be. And so actually she was really relieved when the doctor went, it's menopause. And she was like, oh, that's brilliant.
The relief, the relief.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
it's not
it's
many
only
people that
menopause.
say it's brilliant when you hear you're in menopause, but actually the relief of, oh, okay, I'm not having early onset dementia. And I think with the right support, people can still thrive at work. But I think when you've got that kind of cycle of low self-esteem, low confidence, tasks that you could do with your eyes closed and your hands tied behind your back, and suddenly you're going, hang on a second, I've got to really think about this. It does really impact on you. So I think there's a lot about us building each other up and really supporting each other, and kind of, I have this mental, it's probably not right, but I have this kind of mental cheerleading team that are like, come on, you've got this. You can do this. You just need to dig a bit deeper than you did previously, but you can still do this. You've got this.
I love that. I love that. I love numbers. So let me give you something that I think you might find interesting. I really enjoyed listening to Amanda and Liz talk about that. And what that brought to my mind, there was a study that was published by the CIPD this week or late last week, and it was under health and well-being at work, and it was done with the CIPD and Simply Health, and they provided some data, like key insights around employee well-being. One thing I'm happy about with this research is that they framed it as health and well-being and not just a women's health issue, and I think that's really positive step in that sense. And they say 53% of organizations have a well-being from the group that they've sampled. Only 53% of them have a well-being strategy, and 33% still take a reactive approach. So basically, they're waiting for something to happen before they do anything. 17% of those organizations have policies and processes to support menstrual health, and only 73% provide menopause transition support. So there is quite a lot of data. I'm not going to bore you with all the information. I can share the link with Liz, and you can share it afterwards if you wish. But I think there is what I find really interesting is that there is a way that organizations who are savvy are framing these discussions, because sometimes I feel like when organizations want to talk about women's health, it's almost like the other half of the organization just switches off, because it's like, well, it's nothing to do with me. I'm not a woman. So it's mentally, really, they kind of switch off. But when you look at it, where they're considering the support that they provide through an employee's work life, through the life journey of employees and think, what support can we provide? There's no point providing, like, should we say Friday pizzas for everyone, and there is the office ping pong and all of that. That's all very well and good, but if I'm going through what you're describing to me right now, how does that really support the life stage? How does it help me when I have brain fog and I'm still trying to do my best, and you still put me on the 40-hour working week, for example, and that, my flexible working application has not been approved and all of that. So it's really interesting to see that some organizations are making the shift in terms of how they view health and well-being at work, not just focusing on it as a parent issue or as an issue for women, but they're looking at it as part of like their whole health and well-being strategy. And some of them are giving it, the required attention that it needs. So I think the shift is happening. It's still slow as far as I'm concerned, but I think something is happening, and we can just applaud that whenever we see it.
But I think it is a conversation for everyone, isn't it?
It is.
And like Liz said at the beginning, any men listening to this, everyone has mothers, sisters, wives, partners, children, who will experience a lot of these health issues. And actually they can support them. Equally, it does affect them. So, I've had men on training who have said, actually, I feel mentally exhausted because for the last 2 weeks, my wife hasn't slept because she's got restless legs, she's hot, she's cold, the window's open, the window's shut, the duvet's on, the duvet's off, then she needs the toilet, then she's got a raging thirst. And so I'm mentally exhausted from her being up all night.
And I think that's the really crucial bit, Amanda, in terms of when I mentioned about my friend and the dynamic of her relationship with her mother. That's the same in the workplace. If you've got colleagues and they are female, and you've always been able to rely on them to get the job done or do whatever, and suddenly you just see this change in performance, actually understanding why and going, right, do we need to shift the way we do this? Is it better if instead of asking you, I send you an email, or so you've got a written, reminder, or just adapting? That means you're able to support your team to perform to the best of their abilities, but it might be different to how you had to support them 6 months ago, or different again to how they need to work in 6 months' time. But I think it's that importance of opening the conversation.
Absolutely.
And like you say, actually, if we look at this as a workplace issue, it might be about the fact that men want more flexibility to pick up some slack and do different things at home. They want to be doing more of the hands-on caring. They want to be doing the school runs or the after school activities and clubs and things like that, which again typically often fall to particular people in the household. and I'm trying not to have those gender roles, but it's that thing where we go, if you just look at support for people, you're taking into account all those different scenarios and how that balance might look within anybody's household, and what that needs to be. So with the next question then, so how do we keep our careers on track and balance our sort of well-being and other priorities throughout our career?
That's a big question, Liz, because because it is a big question. And if you think about it, I think different life stages requires a different version of me. If I look at it that way, and that different version of me, different career stage. I mean, I've worked in a regional role across multiple sites that I've worked. I can't even begin to think how many hours a week I was putting in at the time and how much traveling I was doing then. And when I look at my life now, it's like I couldn't do half of that anymore because of where I am now, young children. It's just not practical for me to do, for me to be able to do that. So I think it's really important that we're clear on what our definition of success is at different points in time. So at that time, putting in the hours was important for me. I had fewer responsibilities than I do now. My motivation back then is different from what it is now. So to be clear, and I've not always known this. I'm not that brilliant, I had to go through my own journey to get to the point where I am now, what I consider to be my success career-wise is different now because I've walked that journey and I'm still walking it as we speak. So I think it's to think about what does success look like now? And I think a lot of our frustration comes from still wanting to come back to what Amanda said earlier, kind of wanting to do what we used to do when I was 20 and trying to do that now. It's a recipe for frustration, really. Whether my body is going to do it, whether the time that I have to do it is going to do it, it's a different question. I can wish it all I want, but whether that's actually going to happen is a whole different conversation. So I think a lot of it is thinking about what that success looks like now and how can I adapt that? What shifts do we need to make? So for some people, it would require getting an entirely new job, leaving the job that you love, that you've loved for many years and thinking, okay, maybe I still want to carry on doing this work, but I'm just going to have to do it in a different way now. And think what does that look like? And also, can I afford to live like this? Look at the economics of it as well, because sometimes, we want to do things, but then we have to crunch the numbers, isn't it? And that's part of the pressure that we have and think, will I be able to live if I make this shift? And a lot of it is also try and error. And think, okay, let me throw myself into it and then see how far I go, see what changes I need to make, see what adjustments I need to make. That's why I said it's a big question, and I fully understand that different people will go through different paths to be able to get to that answer. If they get to that answer, maybe it's still all part of a journey. But I think really thinking about what success looks like for us at different stages, I think is very important to help us to, again, starts with us. But for a few people that have been quite lucky, they've been able to do all of that within one organization. They've been able to they've been able to pivot within that same organization because of how some people have been lucky enough to be able to do that, and some people have had to look elsewhere. But I think we need to take charge of the situation and kind of make some decisions around that. So that's kind of the first thought that has come to mind for me.
Yeah. I think to build on that, there's a way of, I agree that you need to think about what does success look like, but sometimes I encourage women to think about, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? Because actually what you say is things evolve, things look different, my life is different, I've got different priorities, and actually if I'm saying yes to this really high powered job that's super stressful and means I need to travel, I'm actually saying no to spending time with the kids. Is that something, and that might be fine, is that something I'm willing to compromise, or actually does that kind of make me feel a bit kind of icky? But there's also something about being really clear about that whole person, like that kind of, I guess that feeds into it. How do I imagine my life to be? What do I want it to look like from a completely holistic point of view, rather than just my career? Because I think careers are something that can typically define us. And if we say, actually, I want to be a happy human, so actually, what does that look like, and what changes will I make? But also asking for support. I think there's so many, and I work exclusively with women, so I say women because that's the clients that I have. They're unable to articulate what support they need, or they're not willing to, or they feel nervous about it, or guilty, or whatever it is. And so actually being able to ask, I need a mentor. I need to work through this. I want to speak to someone who's been on this journey and got to the point in their career that I have, that I want to be at, and I want to kind of pick their brains on what they've done. Or actually maybe I want a sponsor, I really want to stay in this organization, but how do I navigate that, and how do I get, this opportunity came up and I wasn't put forward for it, I need someone more senior to kind of fly my flag for me. But also, do you know what you're asking for? Do you know what you really need and what's holding you back? And I think sometimes being able to communicate, there's some research that shows that there's 83% of managers assume that when someone comes back from maternity leave, they are less focused on their career. And so when I do maternity coaching with organizations and I'm working with women, I'll say, what does this look like for you? And some of them will say, that's it now, that's the ceiling, I really want to stay in this role. Some of them, and a bigger proportion than you would imagine, say, what I'm like, that hasn't changed. I want to be like CEO. That's my, trajectory. But if they don't have the conversation and they don't communicate it, the assumption is they're probably not that bothered. Or when they're on maternity, we won't put them forward for that promotional cycle because, they've got a child now. So that's probably not something on there. So what I would say is be used to having those conversations that really spell out, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking to move roles. This is what so have those conversations.
I think that's a really great point, actually, because I know after I had my daughter, I love being a mum. But actually, I really struggled with a sense of loss of identity.
I did, yeah.
I couldn't remember how to have a conversation about something other than nappies or weaning or how much sleep I hadn't had. It's that shift. And so I think for a lot of people, they actually really desperately want to get back to work. And there's that, as you say, that assumption from whether it's the organisation or whether it's we assume within ourselves this is what we want. There have been a series of posts recently about things that you wouldn't say to men. And one of them was, oh, you've had kids now, are you going to go part-time? But actually, as a family, okay, we've had kids now. Does one of us want to go part-time? It doesn't have to be that default of, well, actually, it's automatically us. I mean, I think there is, there's things like Parenting Out Loud and loads of great campaigns to help shift that perception. But I think just having those conversations in the workplace, being prepared mentally yourself to know what you want, but then also being able to have a conversation with the organisation to say, well, actually, no, I'm more committed than ever. And, yes, I've got plans in place, I've got a support network and everything else. So please don't talk, assume is really vital, isn't it? That's great advice, Gemma.
Can I ask a question? I know you're the interviewer now, Liz. Don't worry, I'm not taking over. No, I apologize. No matter what it looks like, I'm not trying to take over. But just something that you said, Liz, and Gemma as well, kind of brought a question to my mind. You said that women should be open about having these conversations. You've used an example of returning from maternity leave, and to be able to say, this is what it looks like for me now, or this is what I want to keep doing, or want to do less of that. Where do you think that responsibility lies? Do you think that there is something for organizations to do there to be able to start this conversation, or do you think it relies on the women to be able to take the initiative and start this conversation? The second part of it for me is a more cultural issue for women as well. So women from like a global majority, I'm not talking, and I can't speak for everyone, but if I take an example of women from typically Black household and Asian women, for example, there is a way that we're socialized in terms of asking for what we want, what we need, prioritizing our own needs. What advice would you have for us in terms of how we broach and this sounds like another different topic. Maybe that's something for you to write down, Liz. In the context of a workplace for us, and I know this also applies to white women as well, but maybe more for us than for them. Where does this responsibility lie? Is it with us? Is it with the organization? Is it joint? How do we start it in terms of doing that? I'll go back to being a guest now. That's my question. But this is what you said, it kind of prompted that in my mind.
I love that question, Tutu. And actually, for me, I think this is really a great topic, and it probably is worth exploring at another time. But very quickly, I would say the responsibility falls on both, because in a workplace, you have to have created psychological safety. for people to be able to tell you what they need. If you haven't created that safety, then they won't tell you because they fear that that is going to disadvantage them in some way. So it's like on interview details and job applications and things where they say, you know, please tell us if you have a registered disability and require reasonable adjustments. I don't know you, and you're asking me for something really personal and something that you could use against me. And so for me, I love that more companies now are moving to say, you know, please tell us what you need to perform at your best. There's no mention of disability. There's no mention of registered anything. It's what do you need to be comfortable? So that might just be that you have a bit of anxiety, or actually you're a single mum and you've got to do school run, and so you don't want to be having an interview at right on school pickup time, or you know, and I think creating that safety for people to say, well, I can talk about my role in conjunction with being a parent without them automatically going, oh, write her off or write him off, I think is crucially important. So that for me, it's got to sit with both, that responsibility. You guys all agree?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the environment, the responsibility of the manager to create an environment where that conversation's okay. And I love that question. It's what I recommend that managers say. What is it that I can do to help you be your best? And to open that conversation, to think about the environment you have those conversations, to think about the questions you ask, to think about the amount of silence that you use when you're in that environment. But I also think there's something about the way that we have those conversations, particularly if we're thinking about maternity and women coming back to work. Actually, rather than approaching it from a, you know, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to come back 3 days a week, or you know, it's because of this, it's because of that. Actually, you just need to align mutually with something that's a shared goal with both of you. In order for me to be my best at work, I need this. If I get that, I'm going to be able to be engaging, I'm going to be able to have more energy, and I'm going to feel like I've got a really good balance, and I'm going to do my best for you. I really want to be successful in this role, and I know that this, at least, you know, for 3 months, if we can try it, I think this is going to be a really good step forward. So kind of making that conversation much less apologetic and much more, you know, this is something good for you as well, because it's, you know, it is, they are getting your skill, loads of skill, loads of lived experience, loads of real kind of passion and cultural fit. And then there needs to be kind of an equal. So go into that conversation as an equal rather than a, you know, I'm such a subservient, I'm so sorry that I've had, you know, I've had this time off and this is, and I think there's a lot of confidence in that. And I guess that's why, I mean, ironically, 9% of organisations have maternity return support for their women, which just is a ridiculously low number. But I think actually sometimes we need to help women to rehearse and practice those conversations, because it's not something that is particularly inbred or encouraged at a very young age. You know, be nice, be quiet, get your head down, just, you know, be noticed for being a good person. So yeah, we could have a whole topic on this.
I think the narrative as well. I think the narrative in the media are all talking about the demands of flexible working, and how, you know, whether it's Gen Z or whoever, making all these awful, unreasonable demands of wanting work-life balance. And you go, no, surely that's great, because if you've got happy people, they're going to be performing really well. And it might be that you haven't had a job share situation before, but that doesn't mean it won't work brilliantly for you. And I think quite often organisations are entrenched in that whole, oh, we haven't done it like this before, or we don't do it like that here. Well, why not? Let's tip it on its head and find out why you don't, because you could be doing something really brilliant and really amazing if you just flip things around a bit. And so I think that again is the other part of that whole flexible working debate. It's not, oh God, we're doing the employees a huge favor. It's like we're empowering employees to be brilliant and amazing. Why wouldn't you? It's like, yeah. So Yeah, we could go on for a long time. So I think actually that leads us really nicely into the final question in terms of how can we take that support and focus that we're giving ourselves, that permission we're giving, that strength and sort of resilience that we're getting from our own, whether it's a bath or a dog walk or all these things that give us that better equipment really to manage ourselves. How do we take that support and focus into the workplace for other employees that we're managing, for everybody?
I think the biggest thing that we can do to support other people in terms of their mindset, their resilience, is to be curious and open with the conversations that we have, with the engagements that we have, and just realizing that, you know, yes, there might not be all the support that we would want from our organization, but actually in every interaction you have with another human, you've got a responsibility. You know, people forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And I think there's something very important in being aware that my solution to your problem will not be the right solution. So you come to me with a problem, Liz, and I'll say, what you should do is blah, blah, blah. And you're sitting there thinking, oh, thanks, Gemma, that's really helpful. But oh, God, no, that wasn't working for me. You know, I don't like baths, Amanda. Or actually, that's going to be perfect for me. But actually being able to have people to come to their own conclusions. So I think more coaching, less telling is probably one of the key things that just comes to mind initially. Obviously, there's huge benefits in organizations putting in place listening to what people want in organizations. So actually ask them. You know, the number of business owners that I meet that are like, yeah, I think the women are okay. Like, but do you know that? Have you asked them? Actually, why don't you do some research to say, like, what's getting in their way of developing? What do they feel is needed? And then respond to those things, you know, whether it's putting in place a coaching program for female talent and leadership so you get more diversity in senior level teams. But actually, if you never know what somebody needs, you can never properly address it. So I think be curious and listen would be my two things.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I think the whole intersectional piece, again, to come back to what Tutu was saying, is really important as well. If you don't have an understanding of a different set of circumstances, learn. Be open to learning and be open to getting that knowledge. I think the emphasis is often put on underrepresented groups and people to provide that education about themselves and their own experience, which is great to a degree, but also, again, as an organisation, think a bit ahead and go, oh, well, can we assume that everybody is going to be happy with this same set of questions or same set of policies, and how understanding how those conversations might look and feel very different to different demographics. You know, if you have a disability, if you're LGBTQ plus, if you are, as you say, to global majority, then actually some of those approaches might need to be different. So interesting.
I think using your voice and encouraging others to find their voice is really important. So and again, I completely agree with what Gemma says about, you know, don't tell people, because what I think is a great solution, someone else might think is an awful solution. But if I've told them to do it, they feel like they have to. And so then, you know, it can bring on anxiety of, oh, Amanda's my boss and Amanda said I've got to do this, so I should do this. And actually it doesn't fix the problem. It just creates another problem. So I think using your voice, helping other people and empowering them to find their voice, and then having those coaching conversations without calling it necessarily coaching, you know, having that conversation where you can unpack something and explore something. For me, I think I suppose I learned lots of lessons along the way through my career. But it was really nice. I worked with a group of people who were disabled and global majority. And we'd made certain assumptions because we were doing a career development program for them. And we'd made certain assumptions based on things that, you know, were logical, common sense, and that things that people had told us. And actually, the first bit we did was actually ask them. So, you know, if we were to do a career development program for you, what would you like? What are your biggest barriers? And actually, some of the things that came up, none of us had thought of. And some of the things that came up were just so outstandingly simple that we were like, God, yeah, we could absolutely do that or provide that. And it's been amazing to watch, you know, people who have historically had no voice because they are from a global majority, or they're disabled, or both. They're in low bands in work, and so they don't feel like they have a voice. And to suddenly see these people, I mean, by the end of our first cohort, we had people presenting to chief executives with such passion and enthusiasm and confidence. You couldn't believe they were the same person that sat there immediately at the beginning going, yeah, I'd quite possibly,
Love
if
that.
it's okay, I'd like this. And at the end, they're going, in order for me to succeed and my colleagues to succeed, you need to give us. And I'm like, I love this.
Yeah.
And, you know, they are succeeding. And I think that's the thing is kind of, well, don't put the limitations on people. And I think that's what we tend to do. We put limitations on ourselves, but I think we kind of accept the limitations that other people put on us as well. And I know I found that when I went back after maternity leave after my first daughter, and the expectation was that I wouldn't want to progress in my career anymore. You know, I would want to come in early, late, come in on this time and leave at that time, and actually sometimes yes, but largely no. But I found I had incredible guilt because I'd already placed loads of limitations and things on myself. And so I felt guilty when I was at work that I wasn't at home being a good mum and being a hands-on mum. I felt guilty when I was at home because I then was doing slightly reduced hours, or I'd work a day from home, and therefore I wasn't being present at work. And so the guilt that I probably generated myself more than anything was phenomenal. And I think I've kind of accepted, and I think more of us need to accept, and I think it goes back to Tutu's point of, I have a very squiggly career. It hasn't been linear. I haven't started at this point, said I want to be at that point, and gone in a line and the same trajectory. I started on that, and then I had kids, and then it kind of went a bit squiggly. And then I found something that I was really passionate about, and I went off on a different trajectory. And then COVID hit and it got a bit more squiggly. And I think that's what we need to accept, is that if you're happy, that's okay. And I kind of made this very bold statement 2 years ago now that I would only do what made me happy. And I've stuck with that, and it has genuinely made me really happy. And yes, I've had to let things go. Yes, I've turned down phenomenal opportunities because on balance, I know that that phenomenal opportunity isn't going to make me happy. You know, and people have questioned my sanity and gone, but the salary on that's phenomenal. Look at the benefits, look at the amazing life you could have. And I'm like, but what life would I have? Because actually to get that, I kind of feel like I need to sell my soul to the devil.
Yeah, what are you
and not-
saying no to if you say yes to
yeah.
that? Yeah.
And I think it is really true because, you know, yes, I could have had that and that would have brought lots of benefits. But what it wouldn't have given me was time with my children, time to do things I enjoy, time to build my own business. And so, yes, I said no. And obviously, there's consequences to saying no to things. But actually, the consequence is I'm poorer, but I'm happier. And I think
You're
for me,
richer in life.
yeah, I think happiness is really important. I think we kind of can make our own happiness. But I think you have to accept that, you know, sometimes things are a bit squiggly, and that's okay as long as it's leading you to a happier place.
Yeah, no, that is a brilliant note to end on. I get the feeling we could talk for days on all of this and come up with loads of ideas. Hopefully, throughout the conversation, it's given you some ideas. If you're watching, about different ways of supporting yourself, different ways of finding your voice, but also if you do have that managerial element to your role, and you are you've got women in your team, that you're also thinking about different ways that you can support and empower them to do the best that they can possibly do as well. So brilliant. It just remains for me to thank everybody. Amanda, Gemma, Tutu, thanks so much for taking part. It was lovely to see you. Thank you everybody for watching, and yes, we will see you for the next series soon.
Thank you, Liz.
See you soon.
Thank you.